I've lived in Japan since 2017, and I have a story I need to tell to raise awareness. In 2022, a horrific event in my life led to the death of my wife and my young daughter, and I've since dedicated my life to uncovering as much information about a creature that instigated this horrible event. So before I start, I'm sorry, and I want to give you a bit of a warning. So before you listen, be warned that this is a true story, and it includes the death of my young daughter and my wife. After I tell my story, I've actually gathered and translated every scrap of evidence I can find from all over Japan that mentions a creature, which it's kind of from folklore, and this is what I think I encountered, and locally in Japan they call it the tsume. So a couple of years ago, we were just returning from a family holiday to Lake Toya with my family, my wife, my daughter, and my son, during like the Obon holiday, the Obon Matsuri. We were all exhausted after a huge day of driving, so the missus and I, we put our kids to bed and we retired early for the night. It was then at about 4 a.m. in the morning, I woke up. I was woken up thinking my wife had gotten up to use the bathroom, and she always used to steal the sheets, so I used that moment to try and grab the sheets and pull them back over me. And that's when I noticed that she was still in the bed next to me, and I had accidentally woken her up. Now, she turned to face me and gasped, like terrified gasped, quickly pulling her feet up from the end of the futon, our old bed, almost knocked me in the chin. She grabbed me, terrified, saying nothing. Now, once my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw what had caused her reaction. And at the foot of our futon, sitting and facing away from us, was what looked like, I couldn't tell, it looked like a naked man or some kind of large, hairless dog. Its posture was grotesque, it was absolutely disgusting. And though its body it looked mangled and unhealthy, I wasn't instantly afraid, but kind of felt an odd concern for the creature. Like, imagine it was just any old dog sitting on the end of your bed. Now, my wife was curled up into a kind of protective position, just glancing back and forth between me and the figure, and in a sudden, horrible, jerky movement, it scrambled around the side of the futon and crawled quickly and erratically and just jerkily, disgustingly, until it was inches from my wife's face. And yes, we were both absolutely terrified. It remained completely still for what felt like an eternity, just staring at her. Then it reached out and placed a cold and clammy, a damp hand on her knee before bolting into the hallway toward our children's rooms. So that's when I screamed, the first time I screamed, and I ran for the light switch for obvious reasons, trying to stop this thing before it could reach our kids. And when I got to the hallway, the light from our bedroom was just enough to see it crouching 6 meters away. It turned its head slowly, it wasn't scared of me at all, locking its gaze on me, and I noticed the blood. I flipped another light switch, and there, lying in the hallway, was my daughter, Yuki. So my wife and I rushed to help our daughter, and the creature darted down the stairs. Our daughter was injured, horribly, horrifically, life-threateningly, and she only said one more thing. She whispered, "He is Tsume." In her panic, my beloved wife rushed Yuki to the hospital. As I stayed and checked on my son and comforted him as well. This is where the story gets even worse. Later that night, my wife and daughter were found in a car that had crashed into Lake Tazawa. The police let me know that my daughter had perished from blood loss, not from drowning. A small mercy. So I can only imagine what happened in that car, what my wife went through. Neither my daughter nor my wife survived that night. Now, living in a small town, being the only foreigner, news of the incident spread very quickly, and initially the police were helpful and the local newspaper showed interest, yet the story never actually got published. And despite me being interviewed, it was never aired on local TV. For months, my son and I just stayed at the in-laws' house, grieving and trying to come to terms with what our life had become. And when we eventually returned home, that's when I began searching for answers. In a nearby town, I found a man who had experienced something similar, and he believed me. He introduced me to 2 others in Hokkaido who had also seen the creature, and everyone now referred to as Tsume. So, it's taken us 2 years of online searches and letter writing to compile a small collection of accounts. None of them provide a clear history or explanation. The one diary briefly mentioned Tsume, but never again. There's a ship's log claimed that they were forced to leave certain areas of the water by the command of the Tsume, and that was also the last entry in that mariner's log. Many accounts describe Tsume as returning to the same person over and over and over several nights. And some, like my daughter, spoke of actually hearing it speak. So I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running each night for 2 weeks. And every morning I would painstakingly scan through the sounds, trying to catch anything unusual. It took, over 2 weeks, and I finally heard something. A shrill, horrible voice that was 100% Tsume. I couldn't bear to listen long enough to transcribe it, but I knew I'd heard it before. It had spoken that night in front of my wife. Now, I didn't recall hearing anything at the time, but the voice from the recorder immediately transported me back to that moment. The thought of what must have been running through my daughter's mind haunts me still to this day. And I honestly haven't seen Tsume since that night, but I know he's been in my room while I slept. I know and I fear that one night I will wake and find him staring at me again. So to anyone still listening, I'll read a couple of excerpts from my research. So these were found primarily focused in rural Aomori and also encountered in Hokkaido. I've done all the translation myself. It's all true. Witnesses told stories of their encounters with a creature of unknown origin. No one knows where it's from. And the emotions ranged from extreme terror and horror, unease, to an unsettling childlike curiosity, which I completely understand after seeing this thing at the foot of my bed. While official records of these stories have long since disappeared, the memories of those affected remain. Several individuals that were involved began searching for answers, and by early 2006, the collaboration of witnesses had uncovered nearly 24 documents dating between the 12th century and very modern times, spanning all across Japan. So despite the range of time periods, the descriptions of Tsume were almost identical. And I was able to contact a member of this group and gain access to some excerpts from their findings. So this first one is a suicide note, which was, it's from 1964, and I quote, "As I prepare to end my life, I feel compelled to release any guilt or pain I may have caused through this act. It is not the fault of anyone but him. Once I awoke and felt his presence. Another time I awoke and saw his form. And once more I awoke and heard his voice and gazed into his eyes. I can no longer sleep, for I fear what I might wake to next. I cannot bear to wake again. Goodbye. End quote. And found in the same box were two empty envelopes addressed to an Akio and a Hana, and one letter with no envelope. In that letter, it just says, "Dearest Megumi, I prayed for you. He spoke your name." How chilling. The next one is from 1880. It's from someone's journal where they mention the Tsume. It says this twice, so I'm quoting now. "I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me, pierced my soul. His hand, cold and damp. I cannot sleep. His voice." End quote. And then the last one I have for you is from the mariner's log. So these were found, this is the last entry in the captain of a ship or something in his log. "He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt his presence. He took everything. We must return to Nagasaki. We shall never sail these waters again, at the demand of the Tsume." So, if you've listened this far, thank you. This video was made to try and spread awareness. And if anyone has had any experience or knowledge or has any story to share, please use this space. Talk to me. Talk to someone. Thank you.